Hello. So here we're going to graph y equals cotangent of x plus pi over 6. This is the same thing as because cotangent is cosine over sine. So where are the asymptotes? Well, the asymptotes are when your denominator is 0, the denominator is 0 when sine of 0. So let's set this equal to 0. Okay. Our period here, the period is going to be pi over b. Since the b is 1, your period is pi. So we have an asymptote at x equals negative pi over 6, and a period is going to be 1 pi. So let's label this since the period is 1 pi and you have an asymptote at negative pi over 6, that's your phase shift. I've marked this into 1/6 intervals. So that this is 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, and 6 pi over 6. So there is where we have one asymptote. Since your period is pi, it's going to be this plus 1 pi. And we'll have an asymptote going on here at negative 7 pi over 6. Cannot quite fit the other one. This is just stretched more horizontally because that's how I wanted to do it. The numerator, we have what makes this 0 is cosine of pi over 2. So if we set pi over 2 equals to x plus pi over 6, multiply everything by 6, we have okay, so that's 2 pi equals 6x means x equals pi over 3. Okay, so when x equals pi over 3 plus pi over 6 will be pi over 2, and the cosine of pi over 2 is 0. 0 divided by non-zero gives you 0. So this is where the graph will cross the horizontal asymptote. Pi over 3 is the same thing as 2 pi over 6. Okay, so that is where it's going to cross the axis. That is where it's going to cross the axis. Okay. Our A is 1. So we can label these as positive 1 and negative 1. And cotangent is the reflexive of tangent, as we saw earlier. So this is going to go from Okay. It would be more precise if I found out exactly what happens when y equals 1. This is when the denominator is equal to the numerator. But this is fair enough. Okay. So this is the same thing as just emphasizing the x over 2 is the same thing as 1/2. So that when we look for our period, it's going to be pi over 1/2, pi over b. So this implies that the period is going to be 2 pi. Multiply this by a 2 over 2 and your denominator gets absorbed, gives us 2 pi. Then when we look at the denominator for our asymptotes, so sine of 0 is 0, 1/2 is 0, 0. And so what we have is x equals 0 is a vertical asymptote. And our period is 2 pi. Okay, so let's make this x equals 0 is an asymptote, and 2 pi is an asymptote, 4 pi is an asymptote, negative 2 pi and negative 4 pi. So here's an asymptote. Then when the numerator is 0, so cosine of pi over 2 is 0. So we have when is pi over 2 equal to 1/2 times x. Multiply both sides by 2, and we have that x is equal to pi. So at x equals pi, it's going to cross the horizontal asymptote, and since the period is 2 pi, these other 3 points also happen. Since I have 1/2 as my amplitude, I'm going to choose to make these marks 1/2 up and 1/2 down. And since cotangent is the reflexive of tangent, it's going to look like this. Okay, that's the graph of y equals negative 1/2. Oh, don't do shortcuts. I just saw that negative value, so the negative value would be going in the other direction. Since it's negative cotangent, it's going to look just like the tangent graph. We can test points. What happens when x equals pi over 2? So what happens here at pi over 2? We should get a negative value. So when x equals pi over 2, we have 1/2 of pi over 2 is pi over 4. Okay, well, this part is going to be radical 2 over 2 divided by radical 2 over 2, which will be 1. I have negative 1/2. Negative 1/2 is right here. And so, yes, this is the correct pattern. Okay, y equals cotangent of 2x. Okay, well, this is the same thing as so the period is going to be pi over b. And so period is pi over 2. So let's make this pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, and 4 pi over 4. We can go in the negative direction. Okay, since my a is 1, let's go ahead and go up 1 and down 1. Let's look for the asymptotes. Asymptote is when your denominator is 0. So what I want is when 2x is equal to 0, this is when x equals 0. So when x equals 0, we have sine of 2 times 0, which is 0. That's going to give you a 0 in the denominator, undefined, and we have an asymptote. And since our period is pi over 2, we will have an asymptote here. So there are the asymptotes. And then when is the numerator equal to 0? Well, that is when we have 2x equal pi over 2. Okay, or when x is pi over 4. So when x is pi over 4 is going to cross the horizontal asymptote. Period is pi over 2, so it crosses there, there, and there. And then what happens at pi over 8, the halfway mark? Pi over 8, we have cosine of 2 times pi over 8, which is when x is pi over 8, we have cosine of pi over 4 is radical 2 over 2, divided by radical 2 over 2 is a positive 1. So at this point here, and that tells us that this graph is going to look like this. I'm hoping you're seeing a similar theme with all of these. Take the cotangent, break it apart into cosine and sine, find out where your asymptotes are, find out your period, find out where it crosses the axis at. With practice, you'll find easy points to mark your horizontal axis with. Okay. So here we have, this is the same thing as so the period is equal to pi over b. So our period is going to be 2 pi. When is the denominator going to be 0? Well, that's when we have 0 is equal to 1/2 of x, and this is when x equals 0. So at x equals 0, we have an asymptote and a period of 2 pi. Okay. Period of 2 pi. So let's put that here. Half of that is pi. 3 pi, 4 pi. Since our a is 1, let's go up 1 and down 1. We have an asymptote at x equals 0. And a period of 2 pi. So please, please practice these. Don't just watch the video and say, oh, I got it. No, pencil some of these out. You do 100 of these and it'll help you to do 100 of them and it'll just make it easier for you. So we want the numerator to be 0. That's cosine of pi over 2. So let's set this pi over 2 is equal to 1/2 of x. Multiply everything by 2, and this implies that x equals pi is where the graph crosses the horizontal axis. X equals pi, and our period is 2 pi. So it's going to cross here. Okay. And then what happens at pi over 2, the halfway point? So we have y is equal to pi over 2 divided by 2 gives us cosine of pi over 4 over sine of pi over 4, which is 1. So if that happens, similarly, this is going to happen, and this graph is going to look like. So if you don't find these fun and enjoyable, it's because you haven't done enough of them. Math is something that just spend a lot of time with it, and hopefully it'll become enjoyable. Thank you very much. Please go to tutoring.